Good evening. I trust you've had a fruitful day. I do not say happy. I hope it has been happy. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. Just to tell you that if the screen freezes, if I lose the transmission, just keep renewing the page. Now, if we're in meditation, if you put your alarm clock on for about 7 minutes past 9 o'clock and it's frozen, then just renew the page, and I may be back on. You see, it doesn't take me long to get back on. I think the upload just collapsed every so often. We're not getting the full upload that we're actually paying for. I have, of course, complained. Now, tomorrow begins this retreat I'm doing for Gaia House. So if you want to join it, you're very welcome. It's best to go through Gaia House, just register with them. And hopefully you've received the news bite about that. And if you don't receive the news bite, you can get it on the website. It's on the front page there, just on your right. You can click on the, wrong. This is not on the news bite. So if you didn't get the news bite, drop me an email and I'll send it to you. Okay. So we start tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock if you can make it. Yeah. So we're going to move on to a different discourse. This one is called a shorter discourse in Gosinga. And Gosinga is a place. Although I probably at Gosinga would just has been a good translation. So I shall read it and you'll see very quickly what it's about. So thus have I heard, on one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Nadika in the brick house. Now that's interesting. Most houses, of course, were wooden. So when the scriptures mention a brick house, it's obviously something that wasn't usual in those days. Or sometimes perhaps the first floor was brick and the rest was wood. But most houses would have been wood, I think. I mean, the jungles were all around them, there was only a small population. In fact, it brought to mind when I went up to North Thailand to visit Ajahn Tate, who, was a very well-known monk. In fact, was understood to be fully liberated. And he had this beautiful monastery. It was a royal monastery, so it was excruciatingly beautiful. Now, when I went to the border, I had to go to the border to renew my visa. When I looked across to Thailand, it was all agriculture. When I looked across the Mekong into Laos, it was just this thick jungle. It was quite apparent that the distinction between the two was obvious, So it would have been all jungle really around and about them, Anyway, now on that occasion, the Venerable Anuruddha, the Venerable Nandiya, and the Venerable Kambila were living in the park at Gosinga Sala Treewood. Then, when it was evening, the Blessed One rose from meditation and went to the park. The park keeper saw the Blessed One coming in the distance and said to him, "Do not enter the park, recluse. There are 3 clansmen here seeking their own good. Do not disturb them." Now, the Venerable Anuruddha heard the park keeper speaking to the Blessed One and told him, "Friend park keeper, do not keep the Blessed One out. It is our teacher, the Blessed One, who has come." Then the Venerable Anuruddha went to the Venerable Nandiya and the Venerable Kambila and said, "Come out, Venerable Sirs, come out. Our teacher, the Blessed One, has come." Then all 3 went to meet the Blessed One. One took his bowl and outer robe, one prepared his seat, and one set water to wash their feet. So in the East, often when the monks line up for food and they're going into the dining hall for it, the refectory, often lay people there will pour water over your feet and dry your feet. It's an ancient tradition. Yeah. But the Blessed One sat down on the seat made ready and washed his own feet. Then these two venerable ones paid homage to the Blessed One and sat down to one side. Now, when they were seated, the Blessed One said to them, I hope you're all keeping well, Anuruddha. I hope you're all comfortable. I hope you're not having any trouble getting alms food. So there's the preoccupation of all monks, the alms food. What are we going to eat today? They've got to go an alms round. So remember, in these times, there would have been famines. Yeah. So often they would have to go with a little bit of rice or perhaps nothing. So we're keeping well, Blessed One. We are comfortable and we're not having any trouble getting alms food. I hope, Anuruddha, that you're all living in concord with mutual appreciation, without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes. Now, look at that for a statement of congenial living, of congenial living together, living in concord, harmony, concord, with mutual appreciation. Now that's one step up respect. You can respect somebody but not really appreciate them. You can respect their view but not appreciate it. But appreciation there is a sense of joy. Not only it's one step above respect. You appreciate them. There's a joy in there, without disputing or arguing. You see, blending like milk in water. Blending like milk and water. Excuse me. Viewing each other with kindly eyes. So there we have it, you see. So if you are living with somebody, you can ask yourself, are we living in concord? Do we have mutual appreciation? Are we living without disputing, at least too much? And do we blend like milk and water? And are we viewing each other with kindly eyes? Surely, Venerable Sir, we are living in concord, with mutual appreciation, without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes. But Anuruddha, how do you live like this? Venerable Sir, as to that, I think thus. It is gain for me, it is great gain for me that I'm living with such companions in the holy life. So there's your appreciation, yeah? I maintain bodily acts of loving kindness towards these venerable ones, both openly and privately. I maintain venerable acts of loving kindness towards both openly and privately. I maintain mental acts of loving kindness towards them both openly and privately. And I consider, why should I not set aside what I wish to do and do what the venerable ones wish to do? Then I set aside what I wish to do and do what the venerable ones wish to do. We are different in body, Venerable Sir, but one in mind. Now, have a look at this one then. Why should I not set apart? Well, first of all, it's this whole business of appreciation and thinking well of people, acting well of people. Doesn't mean to say that sometimes they don't do things which they ought not to do, or yourself not do things which you ought not to do. But in the general, there is this attitude of loving kindness, attitude of goodwill. But then why should I not set aside what I wish to do and do what the venerables wish to do? Now, remember, the three of them are all saying this to themselves, right? So therefore you have three people who might sit together and say, what would you like to do? What would you like to do? And then after some discussion, come to an agreement of what ought to be done. But obviously, you've all got to say it. In a household of three where only one says it, then there's no doubt that you might feel abused because everybody else will just want to do what they want to do. So, but that is an attitude in your household. If you are living with somebody, sharing or living with somebody, that is something that obviously brings about this feeling of milk and water. So you might try that if you find that you're always in loggerheads with people. There's a bit of irritation. I want to do this, you want to do that. Why don't we do it this way? This should be over here. And then just to sort of give up a little. Now for me, this was a bit a training when I opened the centre, because obviously I thought, well, we should do things this way. And often I had what do we used to call them in those days? An assistant, a facilitator. We had a set of facilitators, about 1, 2, 3, we had 4, I think, 4 different men who came to facilitate. And they were all brilliant, but of course they would do it their way. And sometimes I would say, why don't we do it this way, you see? And no notice would be taken. Well, and then I would say it again, you see, just to see in case they'd forgotten, you see. And they didn't do it the way I would suggest it, you see. So I would feel a little irritation. I would wait for that to pass, and I would give them one more go, you see. So I would then, next time I would meet them and say, perhaps we ought to do it this way, you see, just a gentle way, you see. And then they wouldn't. And then I thought to myself, well, to hell with it, let them do it their way, because what's the point of getting into an argument of it? And it seemed to me that I lived very peacefully generally with everybody, as far as they might not have lived peacefully with me, but I generally lived peacefully with them by recognizing that so long as something wasn't immoral, it was fine. It was just the way they wanted to do it. So that was a bit of a nice little learning for me there. So then Venerable Nandia and Venerable Kambala each spoke likewise, and adding, this is how, Venerable Sir, we are living in concord with mutual appreciation, without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes. Good, good, Anuruddha. I hope that you all abide diligent, ardent, and resolute. Diligent, ardent, and resolute. So that diligence, really committing yourself to a particular meditation in the morning or whatever, being diligent with it, being ardent, putting your energy with it, and resolute, and those times when you don't want to do it, you see. Surely, Venerable Sir, we live diligent, ardent, and resolute. But how do you abide in this way? Venerable Sir, as to that, whichever of us returns first from the village with alms food, prepares the seats, sets out the water for drinking and washing, and puts the refuse bucket in its place. Whichever of us returns last, eats any food left over, if he wishes, otherwise he throws it away where there's no greenery, or drops it into water where there's no life. He puts away the seats and the water for drinking and for washing. He puts away the refuse bucket after washing it, and he sweeps out the refectory. Whoever notices the pots of water for drinking, washing, and the latrine are low or empty, takes care of them. If they are too heavy for him, he calls someone else by a signal of the hand, and they move it by joining hands. But because of this, they do not break out into speech. But every 5 days, we sit together all night discussing the Dharma. This is how diligent, ardent, and resolute. So now then, Venerable Sirs, whichever of us returns first from the village with alms food, prepares the seat, sets out the water for drinking and washing, and puts the refuse bucket in its place. So how many, I'm thinking of times when I've shared with people, and you come back and there's a load of dishes that haven't been washed, you see. What's the reaction, you see? Irritation, perhaps you just eat and leave your dishes as well, so out of spite, really. But if we're going to live like milk and water, then of course, when something has to be done and you've got some free time in your hand, well, do it, right? That doesn't mean to say that you then end up doing all the cleaning and the washing and everything like that. I'm sure with some gentle discussion, the others might also wash their plates, etc., etc. But it's just that attitude of, well, this has to be done. I've got time. I'll just do it. And whichever returns last eats any food left if he wishes. Otherwise, he throws it away where there's no greenery and drops it into water where there's no life. So this just goes back to the idea of like even plants were thought to have some level of consciousness. And so monks are not allowed to, cut the grass or anything like that, or do gardening really. And also throwing away where there's life, it might it might harm the life that's in the pond or the water. So the idea was to put food or throw food away where it wouldn't harm anybody or harm any living being. He puts away the seats and the water for drinking and for washing. He puts away the refuse bucket after washing it, and he sweeps out the refectory. Now, whoever, you see, this is it, you see, whoever notices the pots of water for drinking, washing, and latrine are low and empty, takes care of them. That's it. If you see it, then in a sense, you take on that responsibility. If they're too heavy for him, he calls someone else by a signal of the hand and they move it, joining hands. But because of this, they do not break into speech. So this is not wasting one's energy on, silly talk, wasting one's energy on just needing to talk about anything, about silly stuff. But every 5 days, they sit together, discuss the Dharma. So every so often, they would sit together and purposefully discuss the Dharma. In other words, when we speak, it should be a purpose. So this gives us some idea of how we can live peacefully with each other, gives us some hints. The rest of the discourse is really about their attainments, all the jhanas that they've done, all the jhanas they're capable of getting right up to what's known as Nirodha Samapatti, which is the point where feeling and perception disappear. And it's often thought to be the same as Nibbana, but there's a bit of dispute about that. And then at that time, and this is more to do with the age, there's a spirit or a god or a disembodied being, Diga Parajana. And what the Buddha says is that it's of great benefit that they're living close to a village so they can have an effect on the town, and the people will praise them, etc., etc. And because the spirit is aware of that, it also he makes other gods aware of it too. And it goes all the way up to the highest heaven of the Brahmas. And finally, there's just a P and we should remember the So, and then it says that all the people on earth, you see, the nobles should remember these 3 clansmen with confident heart. That would lead to the welfare and happiness of the nobles for a long time. So in other words, it's this business of being exemplars. And it's the same with the Brahmins and the merchants and the workers should remember these 3 clansmen for the welfare, etc. And then it goes through the world of the gods. See, Diga, how these 3 clansmen are practicing for the welfare and happiness of the many, out of compassion for the world, for the good welfare and happiness of gods and humans. This is what the Blessed One said, and the spirit Diga Parajana was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So he's very much concerned with being an example. And often when we have a rule in the order, he'll often say it's there for to build up the confidence of lay people, because when you see a monk behaving badly, obviously it undermines not just your confidence in that monk, but in the whole order. As you know, the people's confidence and faith can just drop away if they see this corruption. Very good. So I hope you found that discourse of some interest. Tomorrow it'll be more aimed towards the Vipassana, the Mahasi Vipassana. So I hope my words have been of some assistance, that they have not caused any disturbance, and that you will, by your diligent, ardent, and vigorous practice, achieve full liberation sooner rather than later. So don't forget, if I go off screen or something, just every so often refresh, and I might reappear. Okay, so let's do a little bit of meditation.